Black women. Let's talk about self-care books for Black women and by Black women. I'm going to talk about 3 different books today I'm going to share with you. I'm Alicia, and I uplift and celebrate Black women authors and authors-to-be. So, okay, let's get to the books. The first book, Self-Care for Black Women, 150 Ways to Radically Accept and Prioritize Your Mind, Body, and Soul by Oludara Adeeyo. This is an excellent book for so many reasons. Now, I do not believe that self-care is only about pampering yourself. Pampering yourself is great. Having a spa day, getting your nails done, having a foot soak, all those things are wonderful. They are self-care, but there's way more to self-care. And as mentioned in this title, you can get an indication for that, where specifically she mentions that it's ways to radically accept, prioritize your mind, body, and soul. So this book has 150 different ways. These aren't like activities only. Now, there are some activities. For example, I'm going to share a couple of these here, but that doesn't mean you need to not get the book. You have to get the book also to read the specifics. But on one page, she explains doing a grounding exercise. I do grounding exercises. It's something that has a huge impact on my well-being, and I feel so much better. So this one activity, which she explains how to do a grounding exercise, right? So that is an activity that you can do. However, there are many within this book which aren't necessarily an activity. They're more of a mindset reframe or reflection, or just some other way, like a healing process, or a way to activate or catalyze some healing within us. Because let's face it, we are going through a lot. And especially as Black women, where we feel oftentimes like there's a lot against us and we don't get the support. We give a lot, but we don't necessarily receive a lot. And part of this also, having these like ways to prioritize your self-care, is getting yourself into states where you are more accepting of receiving support. So like I said, there's 150 different ways. I've been dipping in and out of the book. This isn't a book that I read from cover to cover. I'm not even finished. I got this recently. So how I approached it was, first I looked through the table of contents. I love table of contents. I don't know if anybody else. That's as a side note. I just happen to really love table of contents. Like with every book, I don't know. This is the thing I do. And if a book has like a very sparse table of content, I don't really like it because I want to know exactly what I'm going to get. I guess that's why I love it. Anyway, I totally digress. So first I looked at the table of contents and I just looked to see if there was anything that kind of jumped out at me. And sometimes I've still been doing this on certain days. And then I flip through and then I'll pick something. And if it is an activity that I can do on that right at that moment, then I will do it. Or it's something I want to reflect on a bit more, I'll schedule it for another day, and I may want to schedule journaling about it. For example, there's one, I shared this on my TikTok. If you don't follow me on TikTok, I'll put a link in the description below, but I shared this on the TikTok where she talked about activating your anger. And this is really powerful because as Black women, we know we're often labeled the angry Black woman anytime we open our mouths. So because of all that foolishness, sometimes we're not activating our anger. And anger is a very human emotion. It's not an emotion to sit in for long periods of time or to use your anger to do, very harmful things. Of course not. But there's a reason why we have, a spectrum of emotions, right? So I just share this with you because this is not an activity as such, but it is something that when I read it, I really sat and reflected on it. I then did a journal exercise on it, and I wrote some other notes in my commonplace book so that at other times I may come back to it. I mentioned a commonplace book. If you're curious, you can drop a comment below if you want to know what a commonplace book is and how I use. But I do use a commonplace book It's a type of a notebook that I use for writing notes about books when I'm reading books. I also annotate books a lot, but I use my commonplace book a lot. Anyway, so yeah, so that's how I'm using or reading this book and cherishing this book, because it is absolutely spectacular. I highly recommend. That was the first book. That's Self-Care for Black Women by Oludara Adeeyo. Next, Rest is Resistance. Oh, this is a great one as well. If you have not read this book, or if you have it and you haven't gotten to it, read it. Or if you have it and you've read it, reread it. But this is by Tricia Hersey, and she is the founder of the NAP Ministry. And this is all about using rest as a form of resistance, as in rest is like fuel for a movement. In this book, Tricia Hersey talks about using our bodies as a site of liberation, because our bodies as Black women have been valued for our labor. This goes back in history. I think this is a global thing, but especially those of us who are, our ancestors were slaves. If you're American, Caribbean, your ancestors were slaves. Literally, your bodies were used and only valued for the labor that you could provide, whether that was labor in birthing new, other human resources, literally, or the labor that you did, toiling. That's how our bodies were used, and that's what we were valued for. Then, and it's morphed now, it's changed to where, okay, slavery is over, but now we have this culture of hustle and grind, and still where we overvalue or we prioritize productivity and labor and how much you get done and what. So we're in this mode of hustle and grind, right? Well, how much did you get done? How good was your day? And we often rank our day by how good it was, by how productive we were. Not by how well we rested, not by how good we felt, not by how we were supported by others in our life or how well we supported others, but also, have you ever, for example, rated your day by how well you received compliments or support from other people or gifts? This is just a thought that came to my mind. Have you ever rated your day based on that? Probably not, because it's not what we do. Because what we do is we rate our days by how much we get done. Well, that's why Tricia Hersey talks about, taking a step back and activating, not by doing, but through rest. And there's many different ways to rest, right? Rest is not only sleep. Of course, sleep is one form of rest, but there are other ways to rest. There are ways to take breaks, to remove yourself from situations and people and circumstances that do not support you, to take a rest from things like social media if it exhausts you, taking sabbaticals, taking Sabbaths. She talks about this. All these different ways in here that you can rest, and why rest, why and how rest is a form of liberation, and it is a tool for us to use. If you're thinking, especially in these times right now where a lot of people are tense and angry, and you're thinking, okay, how can we fight back? One way we can actually fight back is to get our rest. The NAP Ministry, if you haven't already, yes, check out the NAP Ministry. Check out Tricia Hersey, and definitely get a hold of and read this book and implement this book and get more rest. Rest is Resistance. Book number 3, Radiant Rest. I've had this book for a minute, as you can see. I do annotate my books quite a bit. I'm one of them people. I write in my books quite a bit, and I use a commonplace book, as I mentioned before. But this helps me really to soak in the contents of books, because it's so easy to just rush through books and not really get the value of them. So that's why I write notes and annotate and all kinds of things. Anyway, so Radiant Rest, Yoga Nidra for Deep Relaxation and Awakened Clarity by Tracee Stanley. Her name is Tracee Stanley-Newell, but my book, just at the time of when this book was published, it was just Tracee Stanley. I'll put the names in the description below. I'll put her name. And this book, Radiant Rest, is written by a Black woman, Tracee Stanley. in the book, she doesn't address that this is self-care for Black women, like the other books that I mentioned, where the authors specifically mention this is for Black women. However, it's a brilliant book. I absolutely couldn't leave it out because you would definitely benefit. This book is excellent. I love Yoga Nidra. It is not like the yoga that you've probably heard of. If you've never heard of Yoga Nidra, it is the first time you've ever heard of it, or you're not sure what it is. Yoga Nidra is not the typical yoga which we know of, where you're doing different postures, asanas, right? This is more, it's a resting. You are in a pose where you are resting, and often Yoga Nidra is associated with sleep because of the root word Nidra, which Tracee goes into in the book, where she talks about the origin of Yoga Nidra, what it means, where it came from, and the history and the background. But it is associated a lot with sleep, but it is more than that. So I got into Yoga Nidra years ago because as a way to help me relax so that I would have deeper sleep. But then I came to realize, oh, this is a great practice to help me with deep relaxation all around, not just when I want to sleep. Because you can actually do Yoga Nidra practices and not fall asleep, even though you are lying down with your eyes closed. You don't necessarily have to do it that way and to fall asleep. And Tracee Stanley talks about that in this book, how you can actually use this as a tool for deep relaxation and way more, as a way to tap into like your intuition, tap into your divine, tap into your brilliance. There's so many different ways that Yoga Nidra can help you beyond it being a form of deep relaxation for sleep. And that is what I love about this book. Tracee Stanley goes into all the different benefits, and there's many different practices. You can literally dip into this book based upon what you want for the day, the type of practice that you'd like to do, and you could do the practice and then close the book and go about your business. Or you can read the book. I did read the book from front to back several times, and then because I found that helped me to really gain a deeper understanding, and then I go back and I use it as a reference. There's also self-inquiry questions throughout the book, which I absolutely love because I believe in the value of self-inquiry as a means for healing, as a means for understanding myself, as a means to understand my feelings. But yeah, she has quite a lot. For example, I'm just going to read, as I opened the book, immediately I got to a page which has some self-inquiry, which is attached to one of the chapters, and a practice. But one of the questions right here, which just caught my eye: what mindset is most helpful for you to weather life's storms? That's a powerful, I mean, even regardless of the book, that is a powerful question, and is an absolutely phenomenal question to sit and think on, to meditate on, to journal, write about, just to understand how you deal with life's storms and what mindsets can be helpful to you to take on when you are going through life storms. And then that's just one of 4 self-inquiry questions on this particular page. But Radiant Rest, Tracee Stanley, highly recommend. Get a hold of the book. Like I said about the other books, if you already have it, read it, dip into it. Don't let it sit and get dust on your shelf. This is a phenomenal way to care for yourself, from deep relaxation to just tapping into and getting attuned with yourself on a deeper and a higher level. So those are 3 books for Black women. These were all written by Black women, and self-care is one of the tools that we can use to feel better, but also in times when we're feeling if we're feeling tense and we're feeling stressed, overwhelmed, time to breathe, right? And make sure that we have a life that is filled with everyday practices that support our overall well-being. And that is what self-care is about. I hope that you found value in this video, and please, if you've read any of these books or you plan to get any, drop in the comments below. I would love to hear. This is just the first part. I have more self-care books for Black women coming up, so stay tuned.